Zephyr Thorne always thought the red rocks of Sedona, Arizona were magical. Growing up in the small town, she'd spent countless nights stargazing, marveling at the vastness of the universe. But on that fateful night in July, the stars seemed to dim as something far more terrifying descended from the heavens. It started with a low hum, barely audible over the chirping of cricket. Zephyr, now 32, was sitting on her porch, nursing a glass of wine after a long day at the crystal shop she managed. The hum grew louder, pulsating through her chest. She set down her glass, the wine rippling with each throb. "What the hell?" she muttered, standing up and scanning the night sky. That's when she saw them. A triangular formation of lights, hovering silently above the red rocks. They pulsed in unison, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Zephyr's heart raced. She'd heard stories all her life about UFO sightings in Sedona, but she'd always been skeptical. Now, faced with the impossible, her mind reeled. The lights began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. They danced across the sky, forming maneuvers that defied physics. Zephyr fumbled for her phone, desperate to capture evidence of what she was seeing. But as soon as she pointed the camera at the sky, the lights vanished. "No, no, no," she whispered, frantically searching the darkness. The silence was deafening. Then a blinding flash illuminated the entire valley. Zephyr screamed, shielding her eyes. When she looked again, a massive craft hovered directly above her house. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen, sleek, metallic, and utterly alien. A beam of light shot down from the craft, enveloping Zephyr. She felt her feet leave the ground, her body weightless. Panic seized her as she realized she was being pulled upward. "Help!" she screamed, but her voice seemed to die in the strange light. The world below grew smaller, her home receding into the distance. Inside the craft, everything was a blur of light and shadow. Strange, spindly figures moved around her. Zephyr tried to struggle, but her limbs wouldn't respond. She felt a sharp pain in her neck. Then, darkness. When Zephyr awoke, she was back on her porch, the sun rising over the red rocks. Her head throbbed, and her body ached as if she'd run a marathon. Confused and terrified, she stumbled inside, trying to piece together what had happened. Days turned into weeks, and Zephyr's life became a waking nightmare. She was plagued by vivid, horrifying flashbacks, cold metal tables, probing instruments, expressionless alien faces. Sleep eluded her, and when she did manage to drift off, her dreams were filled with terror. She tried to tell people what had happened, but no one believed her. Friends and family grew distant, concerned about her mental state. Crystal shop customers whispered behind her back, calling her that crazy UFO lady. Zephyr became obsessed with proving what had happened to her. She spent hours researching UFO sightings in Sedona, connecting with others who claimed to have had similar experiences. But the more she dug, the more frightened she became. There were stories of government cover-ups, of men in black silencing witnesses. Zephyr began to feel watched, jumping at every shadow and unexpected sound. She installed security cameras around her property, but they would mysteriously malfunction at night. 3 months after her abduction, Zephyr woke to find a strange mark on her arm. 3 dots in a perfect triangle. She knew with a bone-deep certainty that they would return for her. Final night came without warning. Zephyr was huddled in her living room, surrounded by UFO books and conspiracy theory websites, when the lights appeared again. This time, there was no slow build-up. The craft descended rapidly, hovering just above her house. Zephyr ran, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She made it to her car, fumbling with the keys as the alien light grew brighter. Just as she started the engine, her entire vehicle was lifted off the ground. "No!" she screamed, pounding on the windows as the earth fell away beneath her. "Please, not again." But her pleas went unanswered. The car was pulled into a large opening in the craft's underbelly. As the door sealed shut behind her, Zephyr knew with grim certainty she would never see Sedona again. In the days that followed, search parties combed the area around Zephyr's house. They found her car in a ravine 5 miles away. There was no sign of Zephyr. The official report cited a tragic accident. A woman with a history of mental health issues drove off the road in the middle of the night. But the locals knew better. They'd seen the lights, heard the strange hum. Some even claimed to have witnessed a car rising into the sky. Zephyr Thorne became another mysterious disappearance in a long list of UFO-related incidents in Sedona. And on clear nights, when the stars shine bright over the red rocks, some swear they can still hear Zephyr's final scream echoing through the canyons. A chilling reminder, we are not alone, and that the truth is far more terrifying than we can imagine. Mercer Hawthorne never believed in the supernatural. As a hard-nosed journalist from New York, he scoffed at the legends surrounding Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. But when his editor assigned him to investigate the recent surge in UFO sightings near the infamous property, Mercer couldn't resist the opportunity for a breakthrough story. He arrived in the Uinta Basin on a crisp autumn evening, the sun setting behind the rocky. The locals were tight-lipped, their eyes darting nervously whenever Mercer mentioned the ranch. He chalked it up to small-town superstition. On his third night, Mercer decided to camp near the ranch's perimeter. As darkness fell, an uneasy stillness settled over the land. The crickets went silent, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. That's when he saw it, a glowing orb, pulsing with an otherworldly light, hovering just beyond the fence line. Mercer fumbled for his camera, heart racing. The orb darted across the sky, stopping abruptly before zooming towards him at impossible speed. Mercer ran, abandoning his equipment. The orb pursued, casting eerie shadows as it weaved between the trees. He stumbled into a clearing, gasping for breath, and found himself face to face with something that shattered his understanding of reality. It was humanoid but wrong, too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles. Its skin shimmered, as if not quite solid. And its eyes, Mercer would never forget those eyes, black and fathomless, devoid of any humanity. Creature reached for him with elongated fingers. Mercer felt a searing pain in his head, images flooding his mind, visions of worlds beyond imagination, experiments too horrific to comprehend. He woke up miles from his campsite, his clothes torn and dirty. 3 days had passed, though he had no memory of them, and on his arm a strange triangular mark, pulsed with a faint, alien light. Mercer's life unraveled in the weeks that followed. His article, filled with wild claims and disjointed ramblings, was rejected. Colleagues avoided him. Couldn't sleep, plagued by nightmares of probing instruments and those terrible empty eyes. He returned to Utah, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't explain. As he approached Skinwalker Ranch, he saw the lights again, not just one, but dozens dancing across the sky. Mercer smiled, a tear rolling down his cheek. He understood now. This was no mere UFO sighting. This was a gateway, convergence of worlds, and he had been chosen. As the lights descended, Mercer walked forward with open arms. In that moment, he knew he would never be seen again, at least, not as the man he once was. The next morning, a battered camera was found near the ranch. The photos it contained would baffle experts for years to come, showing glimpses of creatures that defied explanation and a familiar face transformed by an alien intelligence. Mercer Hawthorne became another mysterious disappearance in the Skinwalker Ranch legend. But on quiet nights, locals swear they sometimes see a tall, thin figure walking the perimeter, its eyes gleaming with otherworldly knowledge. Zaria Blackwood had always felt different. Growing up in Levelland, Texas, she'd been the odd one out, a dreamer in a town of pragmatists, more interested in the stars than Friday night football. But on November 2nd, her uniqueness took on a terrifying new meaning. It started with the lights. Driving home from her late shift at the diner, Zaria saw them in her rearview mirror, a string of glowing orbs pulsing with an unearthly blue light. She accelerated, heart pounding, but the lights kept pace effortlessly. Suddenly, her car sputtered and died, rolling to a stop on the empty highway. The radio crackled with static, and her phone went dark. Panic rising, Zaria watched as the lights drew closer, arranging themselves into a perfect circle above her car. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and Zaria felt a strange tingling sensation throughout her body. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. As her vision blurred, she saw a beam of light engulf her car. When Zaria regained consciousness, she was lying in a field miles from the highway. Her clothes were scorched, and a strange metallic taste filled her mouth. But the most terrifying change was in her mind. Images flashed before her eyes, star maps of distant galaxies, schematics for impossible machines, and memories of a sterile room where spindly, gray figures loomed over her. Zaria knew with a bone-deep certainty that she had been taken. In the days that followed, Levelland was abuzz with reports of UFO sightings. Dozens of people had seen the lights, and several cars had mysteriously stalled on the highways. But no one's experience compared to Zaria's. She tried to return to normal life, but everything had changed. Food tasted like ash, and sleep brought only vivid nightmares of probing instruments and alien eyes. Worst of all were the voices, whispers in an unknown language that echoed in her mind at all hours. Zaria's behavior became erratic. She covered her walls with intricate drawings of alien landscapes and complex mathematical equations she couldn't possibly understand. Her family watched in helpless confusion as she withdrew from the world, spending hours staring at the sky. 3 weeks after her encounter, Zaria made a shocking discovery. A small, hard lump had formed behind her ear. When she touched it, visions of the UFO flooded her mind. She knew then that they had left something inside her. A beacon, a way to track her. Desperation drove Zaria to confide in Dr. Elias Thorne, a local physician known for his interest in UFO phenomena. But as she poured out her story, she saw a change come over the doctor's face. His eyes gleamed with a familiar, otherworldly light. "We've been waiting for you, Zaria," he said, his voice distorted and inhuman. "It's time to come home." Zaria ran, but it was too late. The lights appeared again, brighter than ever, descending on the small clinic. As the building was engulfed in blue radiance, Zaria's scream was lost in the deafening hum of alien engines. The next day, both Zaria Blackwood and Dr. Elias Thorne were reported missing. Clinic was found empty, with strange burn marks on the floors and walls. Despite an extensive search, no trace of either person was ever found. But the incidents in Levelland didn't stop. More lights were seen, more cars stalled inexplicably. And sometimes, late at night, people would catch glimpses of a woman walking along the highway, her eyes glowing with an unearthly blue light, beckoning to the stars. Note: while this isn't set in the U.S., the Rendlesham Forest incident is one of the most famous UFO cases and involved a U.S. Air Force base. Airman First Class Orion Steele wasn't supposed to be in Rendlesham Forest that night, but a wrong turn during a routine patrol of RAF Woodbridge led him deep into the dark woods on December 26, 1980. What he encountered there would haunt him for the rest of his life. It began with a light, brighter than any star, moving erratically through the trees. Orion radioed it in, expecting to be told it was just a lighthouse or a plane. Instead, he was ordered to investigate. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the light grew bigger, resolving into a metallic craft unlike anything he'd ever seen. It hovered silently, casting a red glow over the surrounding trees. Orion's training evaporated. He stood transfixed, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. That's when the craft landed. A doorway appeared in its smooth surface, and a figure emerged. Humanoid, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, with a large, bulbous head and eyes that seemed to pierce Orion's very soul. He tried to run, but his body wouldn't respond. As the being approached, Orion felt a presence in his mind, sifting through his memories like pages in a book. Images flooded his consciousness. Star maps, advanced technology, and glimpses of a dying world. He understood their purpose with sudden, terrifying clarity. Earth was an experiment, and he was looking at one of the scientists. When Orion regained his senses, the craft was gone. 3 hours had passed, though it felt like minutes. His clothes were scorched, and a strange symbol was burned into the ground where the craft had landed. In the days that followed, Orion's world unraveled. His superiors demanded silence. But the incident had been witnessed by dozens of airmen. As news leaked, government agents swarmed the base, confiscating evidence and issuing dire warnings. But the real terror was in Orion's mind. Couldn't sleep, plagued by vivid nightmares and a constant, high-pitched ringing in his ears. Strange symbols appeared in his vision, and he found himself writing in language he didn't understand. Worst of all was the certainty that they weren't finished with him. He could feel their presence, watching, waiting. Every light in the sky became a threat, every shadow a potential hiding place for inhuman observers. Orion's behavior became erratic. He was discharged from the Air Force, his promising career ended by an official diagnosis of PTSD. But he knew the truth was far more terrifying. Tried to go public, to warn the world of what he'd seen. But at every turn, he was blocked. By government agents, by ridicule, and by his own fractured memories. Years passed, but the incident in Rendlesham Forest never left him. Orion became a recluse, his walls covered with drawings of the craft and the symbols that haunted his dreams. On the 40th anniversary of that fateful night, Orion returned to Rendlesham Forest. As he stood in the clearing where it all began, he felt a familiar presence. The craft appeared, just as he remembered it. But this time, Orion wasn't afraid. He understood now. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. As the door opened and the familiar figure emerged, Orion stepped forward. He had been waiting for this moment for 40 years, carrying the knowledge they had implanted in his mind. In a flash of red light, Orion Steele vanished from Rendlesham Forest, leaving behind only a scorched patch of earth and a mystery that would baffle the world for generations to come. To this day, visitors to Rendlesham Forest report strange lights and unexplained phenomena. Some claim to hear whispers in an alien language, while others catch glimpses of a figure that looks almost but not quite human. The truth of what happened to Airman Orion Steele may never be known, but his story serves as a chilling reminder that some secrets are too terrible and too wonderful for humanity to apprehend.